A reading from 2 Kings chapter 5. Naaman, the commander of the Syrian army, was highly respected and esteemed by the king of Syria because through Naaman the Lord had given victory to the Syrian forces. He was a great soldier, but he suffered from a dreaded skin disease. In one of their raids against Israel, the Syrians had carried off a little Israelite girl who became a servant of Naaman's wife. One day she said to her mistress, "I wish that my master could go to the prophet who lives in Samaria. He would cure him of his disease." When Naaman heard of this, he went to the king and told him what the girl had said. The king said, "Go to the king of Israel and take this letter to him." So Naaman set out, taking 30,000 pieces of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of fine clothes. The letter that he took read, "This letter will introduce my officer Naaman. I want you to cure him of his disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and exclaimed, "How can the king of Syria expect me to cure this man? Does he think that I am God with the power of life and death? It's plain that he is trying to start a quarrel with me." When the prophet Elisha heard what had happened, he sent word to the king, "Why are you so upset? Send the man to me, and I'll show him that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariot and stopped at the entrance to Elisha's house. Elisha sent a servant out to tell him to go and wash himself 7 times in the Jordan River, and he would be completely cured of his disease. But Naaman left in a rage, saying, "I thought that he would at least come out to me, pray to the Lord his God, wave his hand over the diseased spot and cure me. Besides, aren't the rivers Abana and Pharpar back in Damascus better than any river in Israel? I could have washed in them and been cured." His servants went up to him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something difficult, you would have done it. Now, why can't you just wash yourself as he said and be cured?" So Naaman went down to the Jordan, dipped himself in it 7 times, as Elisha had instructed, and he was completely cured. His flesh became firm and healthy like that of a child. He returned to Elisha with all his men and said, "Now I know that there is no God but the God of Israel. So please, sir, accept a gift from me." Elisha answered, "By the living Lord whom I serve, I swear that I will not accept a gift." Naaman insisted that he accept it, but he would not. So Naaman said, "If you won't accept my gift, then let me have 2 mule loads of earth to take home with me, because from now on I will not offer sacrifices or burnt offerings to any god except the Lord. So I hope that the Lord will forgive me when I accompany my king to the temple of Rimmon, the god of Syria, and worship him. Surely the Lord will forgive me." "Go in peace," Elisha said. And Naaman left. He had gone only a short distance when Elisha's servant Gehazi said to himself, "My master has let Naaman get away without paying a thing. He should have accepted what that Syrian offered him. By the living Lord, I will run after him and get something from him." So he set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw a man running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and asked, "Is something wrong?" "No," Gehazi answered, "but my master sent me to tell you that just now 2 members of the group of prophets in the hill country of Ephraim arrived, and he would like you to give them 3,000 pieces of silver and 2 changes of fine clothes." "Please take 6,000 pieces of silver," Naaman replied. He insisted on it, tied up the silver in 2 bags, gave them and 2 changes of fine clothes to 2 of his servants, and sent them on ahead of Gehazi. When they reached the hill where Elisha lived, Gehazi took the 2 bags and carried them into the house. Then he sent Naaman's servants back. He went back into the house, and Elisha asked him, "Where have you been?" "Oh, nowhere, sir," he answered. But Elisha said, "Wasn't I there in spirit when the man got out of his chariot to meet you? This is no time to accept money and clothes, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and cattle or servants. And now Naaman's disease will come upon you and your descendants will have it forever." When Gehazi left, he had the disease. His skin was as white as snow. The word of the Lord. A reading from 2 Kings chapter 6. One day, the group of prophets that Elisha was in charge of complained to him, "The place where we live is too small. Give us permission to go to the Jordan and cut down some trees so that we can build a place to live." "All right," Elisha answered. One of them urged him to go with them. He agreed, and they set out together. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began to work. As one of them was cutting down a tree, suddenly his iron axe head fell in the water. "What shall I do, sir?" he exclaimed to Elisha. It was a borrowed axe. "Where did it fall?" Elisha asked. The man showed him the place, and Elisha cut off a stick, threw it in the water, and made the axe head float. "Take it out," he ordered, and the man reached down and picked it up. The king of Syria was at war with Israel. He consulted his officers and chose a place to set up his camp. But Elisha sent word to the king of Israel, warning him not to go near that place because the Syrians were waiting in ambush there. So the king of Israel warned the people who lived in that place, and they were on guard. This happened several times. The Syrian king became greatly upset over this. He called in his officers and asked them, "Which one of you is on the side of the king of Israel?" One of them answered, "No one is, your majesty." The prophet Elisha tells the king of Israel what you say, even in the privacy of your own room. "Find out where he is," the king ordered, "and I will capture him." When he was told that Elisha was in Dothan, he sent a large force there with horses and chariots. They reached the town at night and surrounded it. Early the next morning, Elisha's servant got up, went out of the house, and saw the Syrian troops with their horses and chariots surrounding the town. He went back to Elisha and exclaimed, "We are doomed, sir. What shall we do?" "Don't be afraid," Elisha answered. "We have more on our side than they have on theirs." Then he prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes and let him see." The Lord answered his prayer, and Elisha's servant looked up and saw the hillside covered with horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When the Syrians attacked, Elisha prayed, O Lord, strike these men blind." The Lord answered his prayer and struck them blind. Then Elisha went to them and said, "You are on the wrong road. This is not the town you are looking for. Follow me, and I will lead you to the man you are after." And he led them to Samaria. As soon as they had entered the city, Elisha prayed, "Open their eyes, Lord, and let them see." The Lord answered his prayer. He restored their sight, and they saw that they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw the Syrians, he asked Elisha, "Shall I kill them, sir? Shall I kill them?" "No," he answered, "not even soldiers you had captured in combat would you put to death. Give them something to eat and drink, and let them return to their king." So the king of Israel provided a great feast for them, and after they had eaten and drunk, he sent them back to the king of Syria. From then on, the Syrians stopped raiding the land of Israel. Sometime later, King Ben-Hadad of Syria led his entire army against Israel and laid siege to the city of Samaria. As a result of the siege, the food shortage in the city was so severe that a donkey's head cost 80 pieces of silver, and half a pound of dove's dung cost 5 pieces of silver. The king of Israel was walking by on the city wall when a woman cried out, "Help me, your majesty." He replied, "If the Lord won't help you, what help can I provide? Do I have any wheat or wine? What's your trouble?" She answered, "The other day this woman here suggested that we eat my child and then eat her child the next day. So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I told her that we would eat her son, but she had hidden him." Hearing this, the king tore his clothes in dismay, and the people who were close to the wall could see that he was wearing sackcloth under his clothes. He exclaimed, "May God strike me dead if Elisha is not beheaded before the day is over." And he sent a messenger to get Elisha. Meanwhile, Elisha was at home with some elders who were visiting him. Before the king's messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "That murderer is sending someone to kill me. Now, when he gets here, shut the door and don't let him come in. The king himself will be right behind him." He had hardly finished saying this when the king arrived and said, "It's the Lord who has brought this trouble on us. Why should I wait any longer for him to do something?" The word of the Lord.